Let's now have a look at some important principles of feminist critical discourse analysis. And these principles are mainly taken from Lazar's studies, which were conducted in and published in 2005 and 14. The first of these is this principle is the ideological nature of gender. So gender is not a physical construct only; rather, it has an ideology which is based on certain power relations in the society. So gender and the difference between genders and various ideas and thoughts about them reflect the power structure of a society. We can see that one gender may be preferred over another in a certain society, and that is based on certain ideological setup of the society and may regenerate those ideological or structural systems again and again. So, taking a critical perspective on ideology as group-based socio-cognitive representations of practices, we can see that feminist critical discourse analysis considers gender as an ideological construct. And this has the potential to divide people hierarchically into two blocks based on their presumed naturalism of sex or sexual differences. Contemporary theories have shown that gender in context is fluid and plural. It is not fixed as it used to be previously. The people might change their gender, they might take a different identity in certain situations, and other people should acknowledge and respect it instead of criticizing them from a certain perspective. This has been one of the main principles or main areas of investigation in feminist critical discourse analysis. A fixed binary with associated gender stereotypes predominates in common sense understanding, and we can see that in everyday and popular common sense structures, discourse structures, that how these prefix notions, traditional notions about gender are promoted, they are produced, reproduced, and then they are institutionally propagated in various societies. Gender, importantly, exists in a matrix of other socially stratified identities also. For example, gender may be associated with racism or ethnicity, geographical relationing, sexuality, may be related to your class, profession, age, or many other. And when combined with other identity markers, it might create even more enriched social meanings. A second important principle of feminist critical discourse analysis is that power is a central focus in critical investigations of gender, identities, and relations. In other words, or in simple words, we can say that most of feminist critical discourse studies consider that that power is a central factor between various social practices and between various social relations between genders. So we always see or we can see two conceptions of powers in this regard. On the one hand, we can see an earlier feminist theory introduced the concept of patriarchy, where men are considered superior to women in various societies at the expense of women. So men are always considered privileged with certain social accesses which women cannot or do not have. Used as a critical concept, it points towards hegemonic masculinist dominance and systematic inequalities based on gender, where men are always preferred over women. Then it also focuses on certain aspects where, when we say that power does remain largely vested materially as well as symbolically in individual men and men as a social group. So, in a patriarchal structure of which feminist critical discourse is strongly critical of, men are preferred over women socially, symbolically, and also in economic and political terms. On the other hand, we have focused notion of power as widely dispersed and operating a phenomena intimately and diffusely has been influential in this feminist discourse. In Foucault's view, there are complex network of disciplinary systems and perspective technologies through which we normalize power metrics, or power produces and regulates itself through these social or political or institutional structures. So, feminist critical discourse analysts believe that power in favor of men is institutionalized and reproduced by various structures in various societies of the world. And that's what they need to look into deeply in order to create a more gender-based egalitarian society. Both kinds of power coexist and intertwine with each other. There are not only conceptions that men are superior, patriarchal notions, but also there are structures in many various societies which promote, which promote such ideas. For example, in certain societies, it's men who are preferred for many jobs outside homes, in institutions, on remote stations, and women are usually discouraged for such jobs. So this is how institutionally a kind of gendered discourse has been created, that women are not made for such jobs. These are the jobs which are of manly nature. So this kind of discourses generate those inequality in social power relations, and they are not only produced, rather reproduced and negotiated between various groups in a society. And both approaches to power also raise crucial questions of resistance and contestation, how such discourses can be resisted and contested by feminist analysts, and simultaneously how a counter discourse, resistance, and appropriation is being furthered by the opposite groups also. Third, and an important principle of feminist critical discourse analysis includes, and it focuses on that this kind of discourse analysis shares with CDA and feminist approaches a constitutive view of discourse. It is based on the view that discourse is constructed in a society, and it not only constitutes but is constituted by social practices in a society. And these social practices not only signify gender discriminations, but they reproduce and maintain some kind of social identities, relations, and orders, and which these orders and identities reflect the balance of power between genders in a society. Rather than assume the gender categories are immanent through their linguistic practices, people do or perform their identities. So they do develop their identities through discourses. So gender is not fixed, rather is constituted through discourses. What I say may reveal my manly nature, and what others from opposite gender say may reveal their nature. So what we can figure out from here is that gender is not fixed, rather it is constituted, it is developed through a discourse which needs to be understood and negotiated. Fourth and important principle of feminist critical discourse analysis is interested in the critical reflexivity as a practice. That means that critical awareness should be raised about various issues, and among people is seen as a generally pronounced feature of late modernity, which is of interest to feminist critical discourse analysis in the different ways that reflexivity gets harnessed by social actors in contemporary societies. One way is for critically aware persons and institutions to generate constructive dialogue or spearhead progressive social changes. Examples may include speaking out against sexist commentary, instituting gender mainstreaming in organizations, or fostering environments that are inclusive of women, sexual minorities, and transgender people. Appropriate progressive feminist politics for non-feminist purposes. For example, advertisers are known to deploy feminist sounding discourse strategies for their commercial gains. So all these spheres are seen into some kind of critical awareness campaign about the various social practices which involve the understanding of various gender roles in multiple societies and situations. So it's not about projecting what a gender owns or what a gender holds or what may possibly hold or how it can be changed, but it is about creating some social consciousness of tolerance about each other and respecting each other and knowing each other in depth instead of focusing on differences and ignoring each other. A fifth and an important, yet another important principle of FCDA, feminist critical discourse analysis, can be analytical activism. And by that we mean striving for some kind of social just society in which gender does not predetermine one's sense of self and relationship with others. Rather, an individual is given importance based on their own abilities and their own contribution to the society. Rather, looking at a certain person from a certain gender specific perspective may be discouraged. So that's what we call analytical activism in the society. In fact, insofar as the raising of critical consciousness through research and teaching are forms of feminist activism, but there could be other possibilities where action may be given priority over mere verbal services. And this is rooted from a position of knowing that the discursive issues may have material consequences, since we know that what we produce or reproduce through our words or discourses may be translated into some kind of social practice which may have economic and political repercussions. Therefore, we should be able to build some awareness which could turn societies into some kind of healthy social changes, which can give societies some impotence to change stereotypical gendered views and consider gender some kind of progressive idea which can help both men and women to develop a socially and politically more hygienic society.